When everyone is special, no one is special. That's how the guest of today's episode describes the challenging facing specialty coffee roasters right now. Quality coffee is more available than ever before, which means the old playbooks of standing up on quality alone to prop up B2B growth isn't enough. Business customers have higher expectations than they have in the past, and if you want to be successful in grocery, you really have to learn how to play the game, or at least how to read dispute codes. That's why I'm thrilled to have Raina Roberts, the Business Development Director at Partners Coffee in Brooklyn, on the show. Raina oversees over 250 wholesale accounts and has managed the company's footprint expansion beyond the Northeast into the Midwest. In this episode, we'll explore what it really takes to break into grocery chains, hidden costs in grocery you definitely don't want to overlook, how to support new store rollouts across different regions, and how to compete for wholesale accounts when you're not local. If you are in a B2B growth role at a roaster or have a hand in expansion strategy at all, this episode is a must listen. As an aside, I've really appreciated the feedback we've gotten for the podcast. It's been really wonderful to hear from you, and so far, no hate mail, so that's nice. If you want to send in a question or a comment, you can reach me at garrett@freshcup.com. Let's get into it. I'm Garrett Oden from Fresh Cup, and welcome to the Coffee Think Tank. The most innovative coffee businesses I know give themselves the space and energy to nurture a culture of innovation. Unfortunately, space and energy are things that most coffee business owners are short on. That's why I'm excited to introduce you to this season's sponsor, SumUp. SumUp is a point-of-sale company with a powerful suite of tools designed to help coffee businesses master the day-to-day and optimize customer retention so that you can have the flexibility and confidence to explore new opportunities. A full digital POS system, mobile card readers, loyalty and marketing automation, and even self-serve kiosks. Whether you're running a small cafe or a growing roastery, SumUp's tools give you the breathing room to explore innovation in your business. Visit sumup.com to learn more. Raina, welcome to the Coffee Think Tank podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited for this.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're in a role that I think is really interesting. You know, we run this program called Roaster Link, which is a matchmaking program for roasters and wholesale buyers. And we hear from the roasters we partner with all the time that the process of doing business development is changing. And not that long ago, it was a lot easier to stand out. You know, it was people would try your coffee and say, wow, this is really different. And, you know, just the sales process was a little bit smoother because you could stand on the quality of your coffee. That's getting harder to do because quality coffee is more available than it's ever been. And there's like price disruptions. There's, all sorts, lots of competition. So, you know, I think this is changing a lot. And I'm so fascinated to hear how this is working for you in your role at Partners Coffee. And what you see working and the kind of things you see coming up trends wise moving forward in the industry.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've been saying recently to people, because everyone's doing such a phenomenal job with their coffee and in their sourcing practices and everything that goes into it, that's almost like when everyone's special, no one's special, which is great for us in the industry to be able to go anywhere and pretty much enjoy a really awesome cup of coffee. But when you're looking at expanding your footprint or like getting your specific brand into something, you're struggling against the fact that like we're all special. What differentiates you? And it's definitely feels like a battleground sometimes, unfortunately, of you're kind of battling against a bunch of different things, not even just each other, but also the space available, which is an interesting thing to kind of take into effect. Like when people are looking at their planogram to be like, oh, we're having a category review, that could get canceled. That can change. And all the work you've done is for naught. But I mean, we've definitely tried to put and plan some really strategic moves of how we're putting our product forward to really make buyers interested in taking us up, especially because we've had such a really strong footprint in the Northeast. So doing any type of expansion for us has been like proof of concept. Can we do what we're doing in the Northeast in a different region as successfully, where we're not having our own cafes or as many wholesale accounts and things like that?
I'm so eager to ask you about this transition, but let's do our due diligence first. I want to ask about you. You have a lot of experience in different roles in your coffee journey. Can you give us a sense for what that's been like for you and how you've ended up where you are now?
So I started in coffee in 2013, and it was this kind of drive to learn everything about coffee. Like that was I was leaving an HR job and I was like, I want to own a coffee shop and I want to know everything about coffee. So for me, it was one of those like transitional periods where I started out as a barista, became a manager. I moved into doing quality control for the company. So doing a little bit of roasting and doing all the QC work in all of our cafes. Moved into education after that, which I was there for a period of time that I really enjoyed. We were doing training for like our wholesale customers, people off the street, our own cafes as well. And then COVID hit and everything changed. And there wasn't going to be any type of in-person training or anything like that. So I was given the opportunity to essentially do a work from home job because they were like, here's a computer. We want you to still be working for the company. So I started doing customer service and doing kind of order fulfillment and things like that remotely. And then that kind of has transitioned my role currently because I've had so many different hands in different aspects where I started doing supply chain and logistics for the company. So a lot of like new product development, making sure we don't run out of bags, those things that make the wheels keep running. And then I transitioned into my current role as a director of business development, overseeing our wholesale and distro so that we can continue using like the things I've learned along the way for growth and retention.
So now you're the business development director, and I found that job description to include different elements, based on the company. So what falls on your plate and what does not?
So for me, it is overall wholesale growth and how we're maintaining them. We have a little over like 250 wholesale accounts that we're managing. So it's definitely a lot of different people, and you want to make sure that they're feeling heard and things are getting resolved and everything's being handled in a timely manner for those people who are in the thick of it in their cafes being like, I need an issue resolved. And then for me as well as looking at our distro and growing how we are outside of the Northeast. So I've been working with brokerage and managing that relationship as well. So it's a little bit of a couple different hats, I would say. Those are the two high level things that I'm primarily doing outside of like other random things, I guess.
Yeah. So when you say distro, do you mean working with the distributor that you have on the, you're partnered with?
Yes. So making sure in regards to like national distribution, even the independent ones that like the smaller ones that we're working with, I'm managing that relationship in regards to like roadmap planning, promotions, things of that idea. And also just making sure product is available. So that's also like kind of cross departmentally. Like I'm working with
Yeah.
like our marketing team where we're supporting there. I'm working with our operations team to make sure like fulfillment is on schedule, all the like issues and disputes that you get and chargebacks. Like I'm doing that.
Oh dear. You have a stressful job then. That's a lot to deal with.
It's
Okay.
stressful but fun. I would in a weird way. Like it hits a part of my like brain space that everyone makes fun of me because they're like, all of the numbers just live in your head. I'm like, yeah. Like anyone from our team will be like, how much does this cost? I'll be like, this.
I'm always, you hear this all the time from roasters who are just getting into working in grocery or with a distributor, and they're like, oh my goodness, there's 10 different kinds of fees, basically. It's just endless arrangements of how these work. And yeah, it seems like a lot to deal with.
It is, especially if they come in code.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're like, what does this code mean? So those are always the fun ones. Some of the other distributors we work with, it kind of varies, I would say, with the distributor working with of like how those type of disputes work. Like some are very like transparent and we'll be like, hey, here's a line code. Like this is exactly what maybe you were like, there was a delay in the shipment or something like that. So X amount is being taken off. And either I have to go in dispute and be like, absolutely not. I have receipts, timeline, all those fun stuff to be like, this is not actually the thing. That would be keep your receipts is my main feedback I would give to anyone that is starting out, to make sure you're setting up yourself operationally to be successful, to be able to go back to someone and be like, no, that's not 100%.
Keep your receipts. Wise
Yes.
advice there. So you have a role that's very much, it's like part sales, part account management, part logistics. What about team? Do you have like a team of people that you're directing, or what's the structure of that look like when you're having other people assist with all that?
Something that's fun that people with partners typically seem to think that we're this like massive company, and we're not. Like we're a small but mighty team, is what I like to always say. So I have our customer experience manager, who I directly manage, and she helps me with she does all the fulfillments and making sure customers are being handled in an appropriate timeline, things of that nature. And that's the main person that I'm managing. That's my team.
Wow.
But we do have essentially across the board, like different head of departments. So we all are kind of like making sure we're in really good communication to make sure everything's rolling out as successfully. I guess where it seems we are a lot bigger than we are, where we have like our VP of digital. So like I'll work with him and his marketing team for rollouts to make sure we have a game plan in place. And then he has his team that he'll kind of be like, cool, we're going to do X, Y, and Z. And then our ops director, who that's like, he handles all the fulfillment, his team. But for me personally, it is me and one other person, and we are doing it.
That's a lot of accounts to manage and keep track of with such a small number of people.
Well, we also have a sales team as well. So like there are accounts that have dedicated sales reps that are their account managers that brought them on. I do help oversee the sales team, but I wouldn't say they directly report to me. I just like give them a lot of information. Like we have weekly meetings for me to be like, hey, here's like the state of the business. Here's your accounts. Like, here's what's going on. Here's like new product offerings, things for you guys to know about like what's changing in the market. So we have those kinds of like meetings as well, but they are their own little ship, I guess, comparatively.
Gotcha. Okay. So let's see, one of these news pieces that's come out about partners is you're rolling out in fresh Thyme market, which I think has like 70 or so locations in the Midwest.
Mm-hmm.
And this move westward is new for partners, but grocery is not. So I'm curious, what's your take on what it's like to be in grocery, first of all, because that's different, and then also to move into areas that are new to you?
I mean, yeah, we've been with Whole Foods in the Northeast for a really long time, and it's been a very successful partnership. I would say they've told us that we're the number one local roaster that they have, which has been really great feedback to hear from the Whole Foods team. And just we can see that by the volume and numbers that we're moving. I mean, working with grocery in a distributor level versus way back in the day, we actually used to ship just to Whole Food stores. The amount of labor and packaging to ship directly to each store,
Wow,
is
yeah.
abysmal. Until they transitioned to be like, hey, it has to go through distro. No more shipping this via UPS. Like, we need this to go through here. Actually ended up being a lot more successful for our ops team to be able to like move volume out at a easier rate. And I mean, for us, that success has been like very much like couple years going year over year, very much like it maintains or goes higher. And we kind of like have thought about how we've almost cornered ourselves to like one region. and why when we're looking at especially like our D2C numbers, like it's not just Northeast.
Hmm.
We're seeing a lot of people wanting partners outside of the Northeast region. And that's kind of a little bit of like our strategic plan where when you're talking to a new region or a new grocery chain, that I'm like, I have proof of concept that I can do this on a large scale because they need that. And then proof of concept that we're wanted in your region. So it's like helpful to have both of that information when I'm putting that forward to like transition outside of New York.
What's the better selling proposition? We're number one in Whole Foods, or we have direct to consumer sales in your region?
I would say when I've talked to and done all of my like different pitch calls, the Whole Foods information is the most prevalent. But it is like that would be like number one. Then afterwards they're like, well, it's good to know that we're also like a region of interest because
Hmm.
that means I would just say it's like just second.
Yeah. Because you can't just show up in a grocery store and then have sales all of a sudden. You have to like put in some work to develop the demand. So have y'all done more of that, or did the demand already exist and there wasn't too much effort on your part to sort of nurture that? What that look like?
I mean, Fresh Time is relatively new. Like it just happened this month. So for us, we also have put forward a pretty strong like marketing strategy to be able to support movement of volume velocity off shelf. In regards to like different trigger points that we can hit based on SMS or email campaigns that we can use from those specific regions. We also have a bunch of different like content creation, things like that we're trying to kind of bolster the information of like being like, hey, we're at Fresh Time, go forth and like check us out. I've even had our like sales team be like, hey, like start hitting up people in the Midwest to be like, let's start trying to promote getting, more wholesale accounts as well out in the Midwest because this is almost like a full circle help when
Hmm.
you have your brand it kind of emerging in a different region, not just like in grocery, but potentially in a wholesale, in like someone's cafe next door. Like those are where you're going to kind of find like people are like, I didn't really know about partners, but now I kind of tried it, love it. Like I'll buy it when I'm next time I'm at Fresh Time.
So if you have a direct to consumer customer in Ohio, are you sending them the marketing and saying go to Fresh Time Market? Do you want them to go buy that bag from from the grocery store versus buying from you directly?
It's kind of a either or, like for us. Because even if like someone at Fresh Time discovers us and then moves into a D2C customer because they're like, I don't always want to go to the grocery store. I mean, I try to avoid the grocery store at the best of times in my personal life. So, I mean, it kind of is more about a little bit of like that combo of like word of mouth, a little bit of like campaigning, and also just kind of I guess it's not we would let people know for sure based on those marketing campaigns that's available at Fresh Time whether or not they continue being subscribers or they continue. That is everyone's personal journey, I guess, of what they want to do. But it is helpful just in getting the brand recognition out and about and people knowing about us.
Yeah, yeah. Are y'all going to be in stores doing sampling and restocking shelves, and how physically present is the partners team going to be?
So we've discussed about that. That is something that we are contemplating about doing. There is a little bit of that kind of limitation because most of our, company is based in New York. So that probably will be based on just like how we're looking for performance. Also, when they allow it, like making sure it's
Mm-hmm.
also in a whole other realm of like who's already on deck. Some things are planned 6 months in advance. Even some like promotions and like things like that I might want to launch, but I can't do any type of on-shelf promotion until like 6 months. So you've got a little bit of a waiting time sometimes.
Well, apparently they let Mr. Beast just walk into a Walmart and restock shelves like whenever he just shows up with his chocolate bars or whatever. So wasn't sure if he's got special privileges or if the expectation is that you're there to assist. Um, you
I
know,
mean, I wouldn't say I think that's if I went to a grocery shelf and just started being like, I'm just gonna put this. I think, especially thinking from New York standards, someone would be like, "Who are you? What are you doing here?"
so, yeah, I probably don't recommend that. I think that's not one of the things that you do
I
first,
mean, if
ask
you're
for permission
working
later.
with a merchandiser, they will like kind of check to make sure there's no voids and things like that. Like there's no holes of where you should be placed. And they're at least more geared to talking to the people that are in the actual store to be like, hey, like maybe you need to order more. Like we're noticing this is empty. And that's just a different way. That feels a little bit more right
Probably so.
than getting into someone's space.
I'm curious to ask you about this because I worked with a marketing client a few years ago. That's a tool for tracking your out of stocks and voids and chargebacks and all the things, shipping delays, whatnot. And I didn't realize that there's not always a lot of visibility into where you have stock, where you don't. And I'm curious, has that been something y'all have had to encounter, or what does that look like for y'all?
I would say that Whole Foods is really good about the transparency on that. It's super helpful. I think it matters like what kind of distributor, broker, or merchandiser that you're working with to get that transparency. It is a kind of pay to win scenario in certain cases, it feels like, to get that information. I mean, even right now, like the transparency of like working with like a national distributor who doesn't necessarily handle, you know, what's on shelf. I can say, hey, all these locations have ordered product, but can I confirm it's on shelf? I can't.
Yeah, yeah,
And that's a
yeah.
little bit of the like discrepancy I find that I wish was a little bit more transparent and would make it easier for some planning and things like that. So you kind of have to pull different levers to get that information, unfortunately, it feels like. And that's the main thing with grocery that can
Yeah,
be,
yeah.
you're paying a lot, I feel like, to be successful at grocery.
A few years ago, I had somebody show me what their report looked like from Target and their report from somewhere else. I can't remember, some other store. And they were just completely different. All the codes, like, it's not written in plain English, like where you have inventory, if it's on the shelf, what all these different charges are for. And it just seemed like a total nightmare to try to, combine this data and like really get a sense for grocery as like a whole channel for you, because just trying to make sense of each individual store, let alone cleaning and putting that data together, was just seemed like a nightmare.
Oh yeah, and I mean it's also a matter of like even managing like promotions and like how that happens and getting that actual information about like what volume move from your promotion. It really feels like you're like going through with a fine-tooth comb to like try to figure out like what information is not for the faint of heart. Would be my, as I've been learning, that I do feel constantly like I'm looking at all these different reports, I'm comparing and contrasting and making sure like we're all good. But there is effort,
Yeah.
100% behind it.
Do you try to put all that into one central place so you have like your history going back? Is there a tool or any sort of process you use to make sense of that data?
Um, to be honest, I'm using right now like very bare bones, like Excel docs, like to try to keep that information. But I would say there's definitely other like apps. I feel like the past 2 months I've been talking to so many people with different apps and things like that. Just so that when we eventually go and grow even larger, I have something in the bank to be like, hey, how do I make my life a little bit easier? Because I can manage what I can right now. But eventually, as we scale, there's probably going to be points where I'm but one human, that I might need some assistance or help. So that's kind of like, I haven't found anything 100%. I want to be like, yes, I've trialed and said like this would be the thing to go to, but there are definitely different brands we've talked to that I'm interested to see when we scale how applicable they will be.
Okay, what's the sales process look like for grocery? And I'm curious, like, is this like a 3-month process? Is this a year-long process? What's your experience been?
So it varies, but it can be up to a year or more, to be honest. Mainly because you're also waiting. Some people have open reviews, meaning you can put in your product whenever your heart desires and it doesn't matter. Or you have category reviews, and then they'll send out like a schedule to be like, hey, we're reviewing coffee specifically in May. And at that point, then you've got like maybe a month, 2 months, like you have found out that the review's coming. It also varies their process too. Like sometimes it's like, hey, send a pitch deck and then we'll let you know we want to have a meeting. Or I've also been like, we're having a meeting. And I'm like, great. Now it's a pitch. So I've always had to just be like prepared for whatever system is in place. But then from there, you're then going from, I did my pitch, maybe they're deciding for 6 months in the future. And then from 6 months in the future, then it's about like, when is this actually going to be placed on shelf? Could be another 4 months. It depends on how big of a location it is too, for them to roll out on shelf. With Fresh Thyme 70 locations, it's not like me rolling out at my 3 retail cafes, what I want to roll out for like a single origin coffee. That seems so much simpler than doing that across like 4 different SKUs. And it's not just our brand. They're maybe doing a whole restock and reshelving. So that can be, I would say, a year process. Like I'm pretty sure, yeah, Fresh Thyme was a year of my life. It
Wow,
feels
yeah.
like.
So this has all been happening in the midst of all this like tariff craziness and price, roller coaster. How does that change the process? Is that something that they worry about? Are they asking you what you're going to do? What do you say to them when they're looking at the cost disruptions?
So typically, I would say when you're looking at specialty coffee, you are looking at the natural grocery chains. Like you're not doing conventional because you're just not going to perform well on shelf. Like, because you're going against, $6 to $7 bags of coffee versus what specialty coffee ranges between like that 16 to 20 mark for a 12-ounce bag. And so, for us, some of the we definitely have had some concerns regarding like there's supply chain issues in general for coffee and being a higher price in general than it has been in a long time. Now the tariffs, for us, we still have held off on making any type of like big change in regards to pricing. Especially because when you're looking at grocery as well, the volume that you're moving means larger volumes of green that we're able to purchase ahead of time as well. So there's kind of a balance that happens when you're working with higher volume that kind of lends itself a little bit easier to like be like, my price increase is not going to be as aggressive maybe for you. But I would say it definitely is a lot to field for not everyone knowing what specialty is in grocery as well, with specialty coffee specifically, and knowing our market because they're looking at their bottom line. But my biggest thing I would say to others is make sure your cost of goods, you can afford it. Otherwise, it's not worth it.
I hear a lot of stories of roasters sort of, tying their shoes together and tripping over getting into these grocery deals and not having done quite the right number crunching. Maybe they just don't anticipate all the fees, or, the volumes are different than they thought and it changes their operation. I don't know. What's your tip on, not falling over on accident and getting into a deal that maybe you're not ready for?
I think counting twice to get it right, like kind of situation. They're like cost of goods, always try to like put in an additional percentage, is kind of like how my brain works into it, because everything's getting more expensive in general in the world. Rent's going to get more expensive. Your labor is going to get more expensive, especially if you're like have really good retention of your current employees. Like it's going to get more expensive. You have to plan for at least, I would say, like 3 years of inflation, like in your head when you're looking at your cost of goods. Like that would be super helpful. So you're not ending up putting more money forward. And essentially, when you look at your revenue at the end of the day, you're like, how? Even though it feels like I've moved so much volume, that you don't want to end up in the negative because you didn't count right and you didn't attribute for all the different costs that can incur outside of it. Because the disputes will get you, they will. And we've been told by a lot of different people that sometimes it's so like overwhelming that people just allow it to happen. And then that's where you end up not being as successful as you plan to be. So I would say definitely add a little bit of extra room in that to make sure you're costing yourself out for not just this year, but for a couple of years in advance.
Talk to me about disputes. I don't think a lot of people might not know what this is, and if they haven't been in grocery for long, can you give me a sense for like what are the different kinds of disputes?
So you can get, you didn't label something correctly. Maybe someone accidentally put the wrong SKU into a different case box. You could have multiple SKUs on one pallet. Like some people are very particular about how they receive their items. So when you misstep on something, they consider that a disputed charge because they'll be like, hey, like you made our team do extra work. So there's also different other stuff you can get in regards to even new item fees will be like a thing that you have to attribute to when you're getting into different distributor centers or things like that. There are just like I think the first time I got a list of fees, I kind of had to be like, these codes, what do they mean? Because it literally
Yeah.
is like CBB 12 and you're like, what is that? I don't know. So it's just kind of like figuring out that like whatever rules they've given you, because you'll get a packet if depending of like how they want to receive things, and they can like take money away from what you would be seeing returned to you from that.
Yeah. What about promotions? Is this, do y'all do a lot of promotions with Whole Foods or your other partners? And how did like the cost structure of that work? Is that, is that like a per item or is that like flat rate? I'm curious what that looks like for y'all.
So typically we do kind of align with the like off invoice percentage off. And so that'll typically run for about a month's time. In which case the goal in mind is for that to actually end up filtering over to the like end consumer, which would be goal in mind versus like it being just for the grocery, like Kehi to grocery or Unify to grocery or whatever. That is our preferred because that's going to make people be like on shelf, be like, hey, I saw partners for the first time and I saw that it was actually, had a 15% off and like, I love a deal. Why don't I do that and try them out for the first time? So it will vary depending on what distributor we're working with of what you're able to do for promotions. You can always put forward whatever range you want, but once again, look at your cost of goods and make sure that you're not. There's almost like a balance between making your brand look cheap and making your brand seem viable and like something someone wants is also a thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So percentage off the invoice. So you're technically giving a discount to the partner, not necessarily to the end consumer, and it's kind of up to them to figure out how that works.
It varies. Like some of them will be like, this is going to end up being consumer, and where if you're giving us 15%, we'll put that forward to the customer so that when they scan it, they get that discount when they're scanning the product to leave grocery. And some people, it is more about like for, new acquisitions. So outside of just like, people refer to as an anchor account at a distributor. Like you need an anchor account to open up a DC, a distributor center. And then you have the independents that might be like, cool, now I maybe wouldn't have purchased this at first, but like, let me trial it. So it kind of varies in how people might conceptualize that promo period.
Gotcha. What a dance. There's so much to dance around here. Okay, what about marketing? Are you doing marketing differently in the Midwest than you have done in the Northeast? It's maybe different buying behaviors, different priorities, or is it kind of the same?
I think for a very long time, we really were marketing the fact that we are a Brooklyn based New York company. And that has been like a really big point for like the Northeast because like New York's really known for having amazing food and having amazing, like a lot of culturally like amazing things to it. But when you're working outside of the region, New York, people could take or leave. And that's been a transition I feel like we've been making overall in the past year or so, to be like, we're more than just New York. We're a really great brand that everyone can enjoy. And I think that a little bit of the difference as well is like D2C, typically someone's already on our site. So there's the ability to get a lot of information to someone. There's already a piqued interest versus like when you're on shelf at a grocery store, you've got 2 seconds before someone's like, I'm just moving my cart somewhere else. So it is a little bit of a different world. It feels like we're D2C. We can talk about all the different additions we can add, like the amount you can save by being a subscriber, the amount, like the fact that we have our amazing like brew crew team that are available via chat to like help people figure out how to brew their coffee to the best of their ability, or like if they have any questions, like an actual human's there to help you. Someone out in grocery would have to like pull a bag off shelf, look at that, read a bag, figure out all of that to be like, oh, there's more to this than just getting a bag of coffee. It just feels like there's a little bit of difference when you're trying to get someone to gravitate on shelf where you're like, our packaging's really beautiful. That's usually the big like grab for like a lot of people, but also learning more about the product itself is when people are like, I'm not just here for coffee, I'm here for milk and eggs and my whole week of grocery. You just have a very limited time scope, I would say.
Yeah, yeah. This is interesting what you said about being like New York forward, because I've thought of partners as being Brooklyn forward and wondered if that would resonate, if the alignment would still be there in the Midwest, because the Brooklyn brand is pretty strong. I mean, New
Yeah.
York City brand is strong. But coffee, I mean, I think people tend to think a little more regionally. So if they encounter like a regional signal, they tend to think that way. So I wondered if that was something that y'all might adjust. Okay, what about wholesale generally? You're looking for cafes in the Midwest now, and you're in a bunch of cafes all over the Northeast, of course. What have you seen, and how's that process changed over the last few years? We've seen some things like price sensitivity is different than it was, and concern about how active of a partner your coffee roaster is. I don't know. I'm curious, what's that looked like for you?
So we've definitely made a lot of different strides. I think weirdly, because of how like things got really remote for a time, uh, to make sure the level of engagement that we're able to have with our wholesale customers, we actually learned a lot of like what we were capable of. So like for us, we do like a monthly newsletter to be like, hey, like guys, this is what's going on. We also do like additional like, hey, try this on us, like kind of like codes and things that we do to try to like get people more invested in the brand and like knowing about the product. So even someone that's like, hey, I normally don't want some of your single origins, but like I want to try and maybe taste it with the team. We'll send recipes out to be like, hey, our team was like messing around with this, like you should try it too. So we've definitely tried to like make sure there's a higher level of engagement, even when like, and still have people be like, it's me and my one counterpart, I guess, to make sure that like people are still feeling heard and seen and like that we're here to help them. And that has been a really nice shift, I think, that we've seen as we've kind of transitioned a little bit to like really focus on those connections. That's not just about selling product or like getting money, but being like, hey, this is something cool in the coffee world. Here's something just like fun for you to know about, because it's not for us, it's more about the relationship than there is the money aspect, but we want you to feel cared for. We want you to feel like we're just as invested as you are. It's just we are small and mighty, and there are limitations to be like, I can't call you every week, but I can make sure that like you're taken care of and you're good. I mean, the sales process in general, as we also have like kind of grown outside of like the New York area a little bit, has been like figuring out ways to support with education outside of where we have our lab in New York. So figuring out remote ways to do trainings, like things of that nature, which we got like kind of dialed into to be like, hey, we can still support where we can to make sure your team is still feeling like I can't get on a flight, but I can make sure like we can FaceTime. We've got the technology to be able to like figure out a good way to make sure you're taken care of.
Yeah, how do you do that? Because if I'm a cafe in Michigan, and there's a roaster who's an hour and a half away. I can go to their tasting room and look at some equipment and do things, and but I like your coffee, but you're far away. How do you compete with that? How do you make the case for that you're a better partner even though you're further away?
So I think it's just based on there's a couple different aspects of like, okay, like equipment, that's a hard one. But let me look into my network of people to be like, I can put you in touch with someone that's really great at tech work. It's not going to be an arm and a leg. And maybe that's actually the person that you want to talk to because they might be able to get you equipment too. I know there was the whole tech guild, like they were talking about like they like to do that. So like having those types of contacts through whatever vendors we work with as well to be like, hey, Zoko, like, do you guys know anyone here that's like a tech and who knows and can sell your gear? I want to put you in contact with this Michigan roaster so that you can help them out. And still being very transparent of what we're capable of. I think that's a good start too. If you lie to someone, that's not a good start to a relationship.
Probably not.
So like being like, I can do X, Y, and Z. This is what, and I'm happy to give you, support, input, helpful guidance of like what you should be doing. I'm not here to like sell you on the biggest amount of kit possible because I want you to just be successful in your space and what matters to you. And all of our team members are pretty geared in to be like, we're used to New York spaces. So like, we're like, space is paramount here. So like, there's certain things of that were really helpful at being able to provide those guidance and setting those like expectations. And if it's a matter of like, hey, like I'm going to send you some coffee, like let's get on like a call and figure out like while you're tasting it in case there's anything I can help in regards to like dialing in or recipes or things like that while you're tasting with the team. Like there's still ways with the technology we have to be able to support someone from a distance. That's kind of we try our best, and we also understand some people do want the person that's like right there. It makes sense, but we can also do as much as we can to support as well. Like we have West Coast folks that we've had for a very long time that do our coffee, and that's 5 days transit to get coffee to them, but we're able to maintain those relationships.
Absolutely, yeah. Okay, what about balancing brand and scale, as you grow, you extend your reach. Sometimes you have to make trade-offs for what kinds of coffees you can serve, or what coffees you could put in a blend to meet the price points that a retailer wants you to have in there. I don't know. How have you found ways to make it work? And have you had to draw any like boundaries about what you will and won't do, what kinds of trade-offs you will and won't make?
I think that, so like for us, as we have expanded, we more recently opened up a new roastering space in Bushwick, which we definitely outgrew our space for a very long time in our Williamsburg store. So that was like number one. We were like, we need a bigger roaster. We need to make sure this isn't as labor intensive for our team to be able to like do larger batches, because that's going to help. We still do all of our QC checking every day. Every roast is being cupped just to make sure that like we're still in line in regards to that quality and the expectation that we've always had for ourselves. There might be coffees that like when I'm looking at grocery too, is like I'm not going to be putting forward single origins because those are changing every 3 to 6 months. So like for us, I'm like, and they're higher priced, which might not end up on, for a consumer level, maybe something that people are like, oh, do I want this Ethiopian coffee that's $25? Maybe not on shelf when you have other things comparatively. There are certain, I would say, some even our blends that are a little higher priced that aren't always the ones that we put forward in our initial like pitch. Like there are our solid four that I usually am like, hey, these are like our top four sellers. This is gonna, I know I can show the data of like how they perform across like all of our different channels. Like they are our top four. Some of these other ones are a little bit higher priced. And when you're line pricing, usually at grocery too, how does someone explain like, why am I paying $3 more for something that I'm going to put at the same price? So that's also something to think about, I guess.
I always think it's interesting to go to Target, to HEB here in Texas, and I see Stumptown, Intelligentsia, Counterculture. The coffees you buy on the shelf there are very different than the coffees you'd get in store. There's hints of the brand that are still in those bags. But I mean, when I've bought some of these out of curiosity, and when I'm in a pinch and I need something quick, have not loved the Intelligentsia coffee that I've gotten there in the same way that I have when I've gone to a store. And I wonder, and by the way, shout out to Counterculture. I don't know how you do this, but their hologram coffee, it is what I expected in the store. I don't know how they do that. I think it's like $14 or $15 a bag here in Austin. So yeah, I don't know what magic they're doing to pull that off, but so there's something there that's like, it's maybe a bit of a disconnect, but also it seems like it works for the business. People will buy that coffee. There's a lot of people for whom that's still probably some of the best coffee they've ever had. I don't know. How do you think about, managing those expectations and, what the experience might be like from being in a partner store versus buying on the shelf? Is there any difference there, or is that not something that y'all are too worried about?
So for us, it's the same coffee, which I can at least I can see why maybe someone would maybe cut their blends a little bit more to be more cost effective for grocery. I can see why, to once again bring into that idea of like your cost of goods and make sure that what ends up on shelf there, especially if there is a discrepancy from like what you're supplying for your cafes and your like, it makes sense, I guess. But it's not something that we have any plans of doing. Like it will still be the same blend components, the same product. Like that's, yeah, I'm like trying to be like, it makes sense, but it wouldn't be something that I would want to put forward just because I guess from a transparency of like whatever I'm pitching to someone when the buyer is initially purchasing, like I just would want to make sure it's the same exact thing that ends up on shelf as well. But
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah.
Trade-offs. I don't think there's any wrong decision. I think there's only the decision that makes sense for the company strategically. So yeah, it's interesting to hear how different roasters parse that out.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it makes sense because all the different costs that can incur and making sure that you're set up for success. But yeah, I don't think that's any plan that right now. There's no plan for that on our end.
Cool. Well, let's step out of wholesale grocery because I think you've presided over some other product launches at partners in the last few years. So let's see, cold brew pouches, instant coffee. What's that process been like?
So one of the things that we kind of were like, why we steamed ahead with those concepts was the need that we were finding that people wanted to find an easier way to brew coffee. And so like we wanted to still keep the integrity of our brand and integrity of like what the product is, but make sure it was more accessible for people. So, I mean, we launched the Rockaway cold brew pouches to kind of make a simpler version of like, how do you make cold brew at home that's maybe a little less messy? Because now it's like pre-ground, pre-portioned pouches that you literally can throw into a mason jar or pitcher, add your water, and then, you know, in a 12 to 24 hours, you've got cold brew. It makes it just like and then afterwards you take the pouch out, you can get rid of it. Versus I recall making cold brew in like one of those like KitchenAid cold brewers and then all the grinds, similar like when you're doing a French press, like grinds everywhere. It's my least favorite thing. You're not supposed to throw it down the sink, just FYI.
Okay.
Some people forget that, but you're not supposed to. So we just wanted to make it easier for people to enjoy like what we're enjoying in our cafe at home. Same thing with the instant coffee was the fact of like we cupped a lot of different coffees and we wanted to like be like, hey, I want to compare my Brooklyn like brewed on a Fetco versus my Brooklyn instant sachet. And the fact that it stands up and has such a high quality to it that like I can travel and have a good cup of coffee wherever I am, or my grandma who only drinks instant coffee, I can get her into it because she just wants to add hot water and not have anything be a mess. It just was one of those things where like there is definitely a world where people are looking for easier brewing, but also still specialty. And they've just been, I mean, received really well overall since we've launched both of those products.
I'm really optimistic about the cold brew pouch format. And I'm sure you remember this, but there was a point in time where if you gave a monkey a keyboard and they pressed 3 buttons, you would be on a cold brew coffee maker page on Kickstarter. And there were just dozens and dozens of these from like 2014 to 2020 and just so many, countless. And, you know, they were all, you know, raising dozens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. And the demand for this is just wild. And they were all almost virtually the same, you know, same core concepts typically. But I really like the pouch format. It just makes a lot of sense for something simple at home, which like that's kind of like the promise of cold brew is that it's so simple and can be, you know, so easy. So I really like the pouch format. Do people like that? I mean, is that like as well received as I imagine it should be?
Oh, I mean, it definitely has like I think it hits really hard in our D2C market versus I mean, we did have it we launched with World Market as well. And I mean, World Market's a hilarious place. Like you can get so many different things there.
Yeah.
And they picked up the Rockaway cold brew pouches because they're like, this fits what we're looking for. It definitely during this season as well, like for summer, like spring, summertime, it just really hits for people because also the blend, like, not, we also have a lot of like tourists that come into our cafes and then they'll leave and be like, oh, I really like the cold brew. And then so now they can have it at home if they just get shipped to their house. So yeah, it's definitely been very well received to the point where I think when we first launched it, we ran out of stock and we're like struggling to be like, we need to get more. We weren't anticipating how quickly this would be consumed. And now we've learned how much we need to have, and we've gotten a little bit better to make sure we don't run out of stock.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if you ever need some whimsy, go to World Market. Don't sleep on that place. It's fun. Well, okay, what else? What else is coming up in coffee over, you know, the next 6 months to a year? What kinds of trends are you looking at? Or, at least just mindful of to kind of inform how you do your work well?
I mean, for me, the like biggest trend I've been kind of witnessing is a lot of certifications, a lot of like almost like bags being just like half of it is certifications. It definitely is something to combat against. It feels like, for me at least, we have discussed, we're planning on doing an organic blend, but we wouldn't want to with certain some of our supply chain in regards to like the producers and farmers we work with. There's limitations on people that are going to be organic certified due to costs and things like that. And that's a hard one. It feels like sometimes to explain to the consumer end of being like, not all producers and farmers can afford the certification. They might be functionally organic and do all the right procedures and things like that, but it is a harder concept to be like, I don't want to break those relationships we've built over time. So that's definitely just something I've been keeping an eye on to just see how other folks are maybe running the world of, organic certified versus non-organic certified. We'll see as I continue to like, I feel like stalking everyone else's products to see how that's going on shelf. And I mean, other stuff that I feel like is cool that I've just been seeing is not just in wholesale like grocery, but just wholesale in general is more people are invested in the stories of coffee. It feels like it's definitely even like on the consumer end. I've been witnessing that over the past couple of years that people actually are like more invested. And it's been really just wonderful to see because there is a lot of work that goes into the cup of coffee. And I think that with consumers knowing more about that, it makes our jobs a little bit easier, to be honest.
Absolutely. Well, Raina, I have so many other questions that I've skipped by. I should probably let you get back to your work. You've got a lot going on. Thank you so much for joining the podcast, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. This is fun. But yes, I do have lots of work to do.
All right.